All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Master Negotiators. My name is Reyt. I am your host and a negotiation professor at McGill University. Every week, I am joined by negotiation experts from diverse fields, including sales, procurement, management, mediation, arbitration, and even law enforcement. And together, we deliver practical advice that you can apply in your work and in your personal life. So, as we get started, please drop a comment in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. And we were supposed to have Michel as a second guest today, but Michel is having issues with his microphone, so I will reschedule him. And before I introduce Tony, if you see movement on my laps, this is my dog, who is Sherilyn and is 6 months and is a bit wild. Okay, Tony, how are you?
I am doing wonderful, and it's great to be on this. It's great that there's so much stuff happening with negotiation. When I first started teaching negotiation and being involved and helping companies negotiate, there was nobody. It was just like crickets when I would be like, I am a negotiation teacher, but now there's all this. I guess it's the world we live in today. There's a lot more need for this type of training.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I see that Michel is back. And so we'll see if maybe his sound is working. I'm going to
Okay.
put Michel on the show. Hey, Michel, can you hear us?
Hey,
Oh, it's
yes.
working. Oh my God.
Okay.
Hallelujah. This is amazing. Okay, perfect. So let me introduce you guys. So Michel has over 30 years of experience in securing high stakes deal in the international sector. He is known for achieving substantial savings for multinational corporations. Hello, Michel.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're from.
Are you
Hi, hi.
stressed? Did you have a little bit of a stress with your microphone situation?
You know what? Negotiation is about stress handling and stress management to start with, so no biggie.
You know,
I figured it out.
whenever I teach a class, the most stressful aspect is, will my computer connect to the McGill system? Like, that's the most stressful aspect. And sometimes it doesn't. And you have 65 people looking at you like, so when are we starting? And then you have to figure it out. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely, Michel, really glad to have you on the show. And the
thank
second
you for
guest
having me.
is Tony Persoff. Is it Persoff?
No, it's Prezow.
Perzo, perfect.
Prezow. Yeah.
So our second guest is Tony Prezow, an international keynote speaker and trainer in negotiation. He counts prestigious clients like Apple, Red Bull, and Rolls-Royce. Welcome on the show, Tony.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
So I don't have a Rolls-Royce, but I'm drinking Red Bull. So I
I've
guess,
trained Red Bull. I've trained Red Bull in negotiation as well.
I,
Yeah.
okay, that's amazing. So here's how the show is organized. Basically,
Okay.
we're going to start with a 25-minute conversation about topics about questions on today's topic, which is price negotiation, and then we will do role play scenarios so that we can really demonstrate to people how to negotiate prices in their everyday life. So let me start with a first question. And so maybe let me go with you, Tony. The
Sure.
really first question about price negotiation that I have is, can all prices be negotiated? And do you know exceptions for that?
Can all prices be negotiated? Well, yeah, I think all prices can be negotiated. And but I also think that all prices shouldn't necessarily be negotiated as well. So I think that's the dance. That's the battle between buyers and sellers. I think sellers usually go into negotiations saying, "Hey, I need to discount my price. I need to drop my price." And there's a lack of assertiveness. There's a people pleasing aspect. If you ask most salespeople the difference between sales and negotiation, or when a negotiation actually begins, 99% of them have no clue. So I think
Right.
salespeople have this kind of empathetic nature. I need to take care of you. I need to take care of you. But then when the negotiation happens, they don't step out of sales mode. They don't step out of empathy into kind of assertiveness or self-centeredness, because that's what negotiation is. Oftentimes, there's a self-centeredness aspect. So they start discounting right away. And buyers, it's oftentimes very easy for buyers to get discounts in price. They don't have to say much, and they get a discount. So yes, I think all prices can be negotiated, but all prices shouldn't be. And that's really what I do with salespeople, saying, hey, say no,
Yeah.
say no.
But it's
Yeah.
interesting you're saying that, because I actually see it when I advise my students and they're purchasing things or negotiating their salary and all that stuff. And a
Yeah.
lot of them, I would say 80% don't ask for anything. They don't even mention it. They just pay full price. But
Yeah.
then the 20% that remain, they ask for it, and then they get it almost right away. They don't have to make a strong case for it. It's
Yeah.
almost like just asking is enough, because so few people do it.
Yes, I spent many years teaching seminars, 2-day seminars all over
Right.
the world. And after day one, I gave everybody a homework assignment. Go out there and try to negotiate something under $10.
Yeah.
And people would come, they would go and they would negotiate over toilet paper, over a chocolate bar, or their late checkout time. And it's incredible what happens when people decide just to open their mouth and ask for
Yeah.
what they want, and they'll get a discount at a dépanneur on a chocolate bar if they just decide to open their mouth. So it's not really to tell people to go negotiate and be a pain in the ass, but it's telling people to say, hey, everything is negotiable, and usually the biggest hindrance to your negotiation success is yourself and your own belief system about what's possible in life.
That's a great
Yeah.
point. So, Michel, I have a question for you as well, which
Sure.
is, what do you see as common mistakes that people make when they're negotiating prices?
Um, I think assuming that you're, especially when the seller or the salesperson is telling you this is my price and this is the bottom line, and taking it for granted, not prepared. And I think it has to do with preparation for one. And second, you need to look under the hood to see what the price is about. Because a
Yeah.
price is a price. Everything is relative. And I think the common mistake is just not to look beyond the price and not to look with the interesting value of that, what that price brings. And then uh, if you're not prepared, then you're left a chance, basically, and you won't know. And that common, I've seen that mistake commonly made to assess what should be the right pricing for this item. Without research, without preparation,
Right.
you're gonna get what you're gonna get. And
This
good
is
luck.
this is a very, very good point, which is, without preparation, how could you even know if you're making a good deal, right?
Yep.
Like, there is no way to know. You're just getting some sort of a rebate, but you don't know who else is going to get a rebate. You don't know. Or if they say another one, and I don't know if you guys relate to that, but something that I hear a lot is, salespeople are going to be telling you like, oh, no, like, you can't negotiate. This is a fixed price or something. But that doesn't mean that nobody gets a lower price. It just means that they have some sort of like a grid or something. But you can pretty much still, even if they say no, like, we don't really negotiate prices, there's still ways to
Mm.
negotiate something.
And like whatever, and that is, by the way, that's the exception, not the rule. Most people don't ever say, hey, it's the price is the price, we can't negotiate the price. That's what I teach salespeople to do. Most are not doing it, even at the biggest companies. They're so that's a good strategy. Even if it is negotiable, you got to put that no up front. You got to anchor that no. um, Even worst case scenario, a lot of negotiation, it's a lot of it is about satisfaction, right? So like,
Right.
when you go fishing, Canada, a lot of fishing. Imagine just throwing your line into the river, and all of a sudden, within a second, you catch a salmon, and it doesn't fight, and you reel it in. That wouldn't be
Hmm.
fun.
Right.
So buyers want to actually go fishing. When a buyer wants to struggle, salespeople have to put up a little resistance for their buyer. That's what satisfies them at the end. So a seller who just gives in and says, "Yeah, sure, the price is negotiable," the buyer unconsciously is actually thinking to themselves, "They're losing respect for you, seller. You're losing credibility." And the buyer's saying, "Oh, this is not going to be. This is not going to be fun." So like sellers need to be doing that. They need to be saying no.
You
And
know,
and
yeah, go for it,
as
Michel.
yeah, I was just gonna coattail on what Tony just said, and uh, at the end of the day, uh, no one wants to lose a sale,
Right.
and they expect to be negotiated to some form or some degree.
Mhm.
So I think we can't underplay the importance of motivation here from the seller's standpoint. May that be in a sole source situation, multiple source commodity, um, stringent specification type of purchases or items. But at the end of the day, you are able to find the right price and the right motivation to get your counterparty to sell that price concession for you internally. And they won't walk away with the lost sale at the end of the day, not to any price, but to some price.
You know, what you guys are saying is really interesting to me because in management research, right, in negotiation research, there's this construct that I think you guys are alluding to, which is the winner's curse, which means that, you know, you make an offer and then they accept it right away. And you start thinking, oh my gosh, maybe I should have negotiated more. And it's always presented from the perspective of the buyer. It's never presented from the perspective of the seller. But the seller, I mean, the if you don't want your buyer to feel remorse or to feel the winner's curse, you know, you have to also manage their expectations and their feelings so that they feel that they got some sort of a win, right? If you know, if they make you an offer and you're thinking this is great because I was willing to give away twice more, don't make it feel that way, because otherwise the person is going to leave thinking, you know, I'm getting screwed over. Like I should have gotten a better deal.
Yes. Yeah,
Never
absolutely. Negotiation 101 for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
never negotiate against yourself. If you don't know the answer to your ask in advance, then you clearly haven't prepared and you're just starting to negotiate to yourself. To your point, Jean-Nicolas, you know, you ask for a price, you get it, and then the first instinct is, yeah, maybe why didn't I ask for more? Why didn't I ask for a 40% cut instead of 20% cut? But
Yeah.
Absolutely.
you need to know the answer in advance where your limits and the others' limits could be.
Yeah. And another thing that sales people do with their buyers, and like I see this, I do a lot of like one-on-one simulations with clients where I'll take their sales rep and I'll work with them. I'll be the buyer. And like, as soon as I ask for a price concession, hey, you got to do, you know, you got to do better on that pricing. You got to sharpen your pencil. They go right away. Oh, well, I got to, let me go speak to my boss. And as soon as they say that, I'm just so deflated. I'm just like,
Right.
I've just lost all respect for you. I'm not
Yeah.
even speaking to the right person. You're wasting my time. And so like, that's another way that sellers can piss off their buyers in a negotiation by
Yeah.
saying yes too quickly, but also saying, I got to speak to my boss, or I got to speak to my team or something like that. Let me see what I can do for you.
So
Yeah.
do you lose respect because you feel like you're just not talking to the right person? That you want to? Why are we negotiating with somebody who doesn't have the agency to make concessions?
Yes, and they're exactly, and like I want them, like when you look at the principles of persuasion, you know, and negotiation, if you look at the principles of persuasion and influence, a lot of our negotiation principles live under the umbrella of persuasion and influence.
Right.
And like I'm more willing to say yes to somebody when I know that they're the authority. I want you, salesperson, to be the authority in this negotiation. I
Yeah.
want to be able to leave this conversation saying, "Oh, I would have paid my salesperson for that conversation because they were such an authority." And as soon as the seller says, "Hey, I'm not the authority. I got to speak to somebody else," I feel let down. Unless, of course, and these are the nuances of negotiation. Unless, of course, you're using that limited, you know, authority as a tactic, as a way to slow down the negotiation. When you're using it strategically at the right moment, I got to speak to my wife. I got to speak to my boss. I got to look at my budget. Blah blah blah. If you use it strategically, it could be very beneficial. But I think a lot of people, they're not using it strategically. They're just saying, "Hey, I'm throwing up my hands and like, let me speak to the decision maker here."
Yeah. Kind of like,
And
let me call daddy or something like that. Let me see what he's going to say.
Yeah. So let me just speak to your dad then. Get off the
Yeah.
phone and speak to your dad, right?
put your dad on the phone. Put your
I
dad on
can't
the
make
phone.
I'm not allowed to make decisions. You know, I need
Yeah,
to
Yeah.
you're
speak to
just
dad.
you're
You know?
you're an order taker. I'm speaking to an order taker. I don't want to speak to
Yeah.
an order taker. right?
But I have to say,
Yep.
it's a technique that I've seen though used to put pressure on candidates on the job market, where
Mhm.
basically they show up and they think they're going to be negotiating, but in fact they just have like some secretary who's there and is giving them the contract, and then they say, "But wait a minute, I thought this was a negotiation." And the secretary is like, "No, it's not. But if you want to negotiate, then I can take away the contract, and then we'll see what happens." And so that's
Yeah.
like a way to pressure the
Mm.
person. Typically they sign, but it's a terrible negotiation technique in my opinion, because it really starts the collaboration on the wrong foot.
Yeah.
And so quick question, Tony, for you.
Yeah.
A lot of times, when people are giving prices and they're making offers and all that stuff, they're giving a bracket. And so what do you think of brackets? Is it something you recommend? Is it something you don't recommend? What are your thoughts on that?
Like a kind of like a price range.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely not. Right. If
Yeah.
someone says, "Hey, it's gonna be somewhere between $80 to $100." I mean, as the buyer, right? Michelle can
It's
attest to
going to
this.
be 80. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and then like really, when you're looking at those first demands, those first offers, what I think I and maybe you found this also, Jay, in your research. I mean, I've had over 20,000. I've facilitate over 20,000 practice negotiations, and I
Right.
put everybody's numbers up on the board. So every time I do that, it's like a little mini experiment, and I've learned a lot from the numbers. And really, at the end of the day, after watching 20,000 negotiations and critiquing those negotiations, one of the biggest things I've learned is how powerful the anchoring principle is, or the contrast principle, or
Yeah.
the timing principle, whatever you want to call it, whatever. But like that first number is so powerful. It becomes the reference point in all decisions. I mean, even Dan Ariely has done a lot of research in this area.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, I always say to salespeople that old expression from The Godfather: "Make them an offer they can't refuse." Well, in negotiation, that doesn't work, especially from the sales perspective. Make them an offer that they must refuse. Your
Right.
first number on the table should be something that's not ridiculous. That's not going to scare them away, but something that's going to slightly shock them and make them feel slightly uncomfortable. That becomes the reference point. And then you want to defend, and this is hard to do. You want to defend that reference point, defend it, and then eventually you can come off that reference point, but you don't. But I think that is the 1-2 punch that you want. You want the anchor, the slightly uncomfortable reference point, and then you want to defend it, not give in too easily, not drop your price right away, because then that anchor loses its credibility. So anchor, fight, defend, and
Yeah.
then you slowly come off of it.
It's really interesting because my experience is really the same, which is anchoring an adjustment. When you think about it, it sounds like a social psychology construct. Like, does it even matter, right? Like, it's kind of like these things where maybe it works in some studies somewhere, but like in real life, it makes no difference. It's actually not the case at all. Like, every single time I run a workshop in a company or I start a new class with students, I do this very, very simple simulation where there is a huge zone of possible agreements. And so, typically people can agree on a variety of prices. But I always collect like who made the first offer and what was it. And then I do the correlation between first offer and final deal. And it's always positive, and it's always upwards of 50%. So that means, right, that between 50 and 70% of the final deal is predicted by who made the first offer. I mean, that's massive. Can you imagine? Like,
Massive,
it's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge. And so
I
people who
found
have
the
like,
same thing.
yeah, go for
Go
it.
ahead. Sorry, JN.
No,
Yeah,
no,
I
no.
found the same thing. That anchoring principle is just, it's, I think people always leave saying, "Oh," and like, even if you look at Dr. Kahneman's studies on priming, which is the same thing as anchoring, where
Yeah.
they show people pictures of like wheelchairs and canes and like old people. They spend some time showing them visuals that represent like old people, and then they measured how long it would take them to walk like 100 meters or something. And the people who were primed, who were anchored with visuals of old people, actually took longer to walk across that 100 meters. So like, we don't even realize the effects that, priming or anchoring have on it. It affects the way we walk, how fast we walk. I mean, it's one of the most interesting principles or phenomenons out there, which is, and in persuasion, they call it contrast, right? So like, you got to shape the way people see things before they see things. You got to shape the way, you got to shape their experience before they do something. And so the same holds true in negotiation as well.
No, absolutely. What do you think about it,
Uh,
Michel?
I want to go back to the anchoring principle,
Yeah.
and I'm by no means a scholar in that field, but from a buyer's perspective, this can be easily be perceived as a positional negotiation.
Right.
And if you want to be positional, I can be positional.
Right.
And I can set my own anchor. If you're going to be dead set on that number or that anchoring and you're going to defend, then we're in a different situation. And I'm leaving aside all kinds of
Of
Sure.
course.
to be brought into the mix. But at the end of the day, if all I receive is this is my price as an anchoring argument and a
Yeah.
defending argument, then at least in my experience, negotiating based on position doesn't go very far,
So
and
that's
you hit
yeah.
a stalemate.
No, that's a really, really good point. And I think, it kind of like brings us to this conversation, which is anchoring is a great strategy. Let's just imagine if you want to purchase something from someone, nobody's really sure about the price, and you wonder if you should make the first offer. Then
Right.
yes, you should absolutely make the first offer, because this is going to anchor the conversation where you're
Yeah.
interested in, and this is going to help you. But it's true that if you're facing somebody who's a procurement person with extensive experience, it's not going to be as efficient, because they already know the tactic. So
Yeah.
they're not going to let themselves be anchored. And that's why I always tell, people, when they're saying, what if the other person says the first number first, right? Like, what if they're the one saying it? And I'll always say, well, you counter anchor. Like, you just say your
Yeah.
number, and then you show that, you want to be crazy, I can be crazy too. Like, this is the number I want. Um,
Or co-anchoring also is a tactic that I've used in the past. And at the onset of a negotiation, I put the number up on the board and I said, we need to work with this.
yeah,
And
no, I
then we
agree.
found ways to dissect and this and that and the other thing, and we're able to reach an agreement.
And I
So,
think, another thing that's very, very important, right? And I think that's what you guys are saying, but just because you can negotiate price doesn't mean you should only negotiate price, right? Like, there's just other things that you can negotiate. Like, Tony was like mentioning all the fish tanks that I have in the back, and it's something that I talked about before. But since I was a child, I've always had reptiles and animals and all that stuff. And since I was a child, I've never bought a single enclosure new. I always buy them used for some reason. And I always negotiate, but I very rarely negotiate on the price. I negotiate on delivery mostly, or additional stuff they can add to the enclosure, because typically the price is already pretty low. And so I'm not going to be like an ass and just like try to get $2 less or something. It makes no sense. But if they can deliver it to me, or if they can give me more material, I mean, I get more value. So all in all, like, it's a good negotiation. But I agree with you, Michel, that typically you want to be careful not to just zoom in too much on the price, because then you're leaving a lot of money on the table potentially.
or there are benefits.
Right. Absolutely. Yes, Tony?
And I was just going to say, yeah, if you're dealing with a skilled buyer, and then you got they're kind of countermeasuring your anchor with their own anchor, and then you got the situation where there's a delta, there's a gap in between
Yeah.
us, and no one's budging. That I maybe Michelle, you could attest to this. I see that as healthy for a
Yeah.
negotiation. It opens up a lot of possibilities when we both kind of say, hey, I'm not going below 100. And Michelle, our buyers, I'm not going one penny above 50. I can bang you on the head all day with 100, and you can bang me all day with 50. So now we've reached a place where now there's actually there's some possibilities in this
Right.
negotiation. No one's budging on price. So now what? How do we get out of this kind of competitive, zero sum mode of negotiating? And
Yeah.
how do we start finding some commonalities? What are some ways we can actually grow the deal? Find
Right.
some win-win, which is oftentimes misunderstood, this idea of win-win. And so there's a lot we can work with there. And I'd rather be in a place where we're at a stalemate, there's a deadlock between us, because now there's a chance for us to be transparent, stop playing games, and let's find out what we need here.
It all depends on what you want to get out of the deal. Do you want a relationship or relational type of arrangement with the provider, or a transactional relationship?
Yeah.
And I think
Exactly.
if you focus on price, and that may be fine for a transactional relationship. You send me the invoice, I pay the invoice, you give me that price, I agree to pay it, and that's the end of that. And we
Yeah.
settle on a number, but it's
Yeah.
a number, and
Right.
Yeah.
that's
And
it.
maybe this year you're going to pay that because you have no choice and then you need to get the product anyway. But maybe you're going to be negotiating with somebody else next year because you don't care about the relationship, right? If the other
Yeah,
person is too positional.
And
and
and do I want to do business with Michel? Like
Yeah.
if he's not raising above 50, a lot of salespeople make the mistake. I have to make the sale. I have to make the sale. And maybe it's because of the way their kind of commission architecture is that they're getting commissioned off of every sale. But like if sometimes if Michel's not going above 50, like, do I really want this business? Do I really want Michel as a client? Do I want to work with you? Maybe
mhm,
like go work with one of my competitors. I'm not gonna play this game with you. So a lot
Yeah.
of great information can come out of deadlocks.
So,
and and
yeah,
you
go
have
for
to
it.
be clear. Just wanted to add that this is why you need to be clear walking into a negotiation on your objectives,
Yeah,
what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to big picture, to shoot for the big picture or the small picture? And to your point, Tony, there's a breaking point. Same
yeah,
with the buyer. I mean,
yeah,
at some point, I'm going to say, well, this is too difficult. This is too complicated, and this is not worth my time for $2 less or twenty
yeah.
dollars less or whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah. So, how do you decide to walk away, like in a deal? When do you decide, well, you know what? I'm just walking
Mhm.
away and I'll go with my alternatives? Do you want to go, Michel?
Sure. It really depends on what vintage point you're starting from a
Right.
leverage perspective. If you're in a sole source situation
Can't
versus
walk away.
having options, then your options being a walk away or the silent treatment for a while, which in some cases it works, has worked. But yeah, but if you have a choice, the walk away, but the walk away sends a message too. Like it's the break glass in case of emergency argument that you pull out in a negotiation. If you want to be constructive about negotiations and extract value from pricing and everything else, threatening to walk away would be the last resort.
Right. I mean, sometimes I see people do that and then they're shocked when nobody's stopping them. And so you have like, if you walk away, you have
You
to be
can't
really willing to walk away.
you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, like they say.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Tony?
Well, I think as Michel was, it's a lot of it is preparation, right?
Right.
And but a lot the problem is a lot of people don't know how the hell to prepare for a
Yeah.
negotiation. Like, how are you supposed to like fulfill the assignment if you really don't know what the homework is? Like, what is it that you're supposed to do? Like, no one schedules an hour in their calendar like must plan for negotiations. So like
That's
us
too
as
bad.
teachers and as we got to give people the tools. I think that's one of the most, that's the foundation. How do we teach people how to plan? So like, I used to trade when I lived in Montreal in my early days. I used to work at the futures and options exchange. I used to trade. And one of the first things you learn as a trader is before you enter into any trade, whether it be a stock or a future or an option, you got to know what price you're going to sell at for a profit if you're lucky enough to get a profit. But most importantly, what's your stop loss? At what price are you going to walk out of that trade and take a small little loss based on some sort of risk calculation? Like for me, I never lose more than 2% of my portfolio on any trade, and that's always my stop loss. So it takes my
Right.
emotion out of it. Oh, this stock's going to go back up. It doesn't matter. It hit my stop loss. I'm out of the trade. And
Yeah.
I think we got to approach negotiations. We got to take the emotionality out of negotiations as
Yeah.
much as we can. For some of us, that's hard. I teach this stuff, and I can get hot headed.
Yeah.
I can allow myself to get if I don't like you, that will come first. And
Right.
I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on therapy for this, but like if I don't like you, I'll put even if making a settlement with you is best for me, you pissing me
Yeah.
off,
It's not going to happen.
it's not going to happen, right? So it's like, how do we take the emotionality? It's all preparation. It's like, okay, this is going to be my anchor. This is what I expect to make on this, expect to sell for, expect to buy for, and this is my walkaway price.
Hmm.
And then walk away.
Yeah.
Walk away. Yeah.
It's really hard to do for people without being emotional. Like to be able to say, "Oh, so you want A, B, C? Well, I'm not interested, so I'm out." Right? It's really
Mhm.
hard for people to be able to say that. But I think it's a very, very important life lesson, not just a negotiation lesson, which is
Yes.
you need to be very clear about what you're expecting from this. And then if you feel that the person will not deliver that, no hard feelings. We're just not going to make a deal. And
Yeah.
it kind of like connects back to what Michelle was saying about the relationship, which is, at some point the relationship does matter because it's valuable to people. If people like you, they'll find a way to make you stay and make you stick around. If people don't like you, they'll just find a way to get rid of you, right? That really boils down to that. Even if you bring a great deal, they
Yeah.
will find a way to take you out.
I
Yeah, go
just
for it.
I just want to say, like, this is the area that really kind of turns me on about negotiation. There's so many parallels between negotiation skill and capability and like being a human being and life, and the more I do this, I'm always learning. I'm always surprised by this area of negotiation. Oh shit, I didn't know that 10 years ago, but now I'm
Right.
seeing these parallels. And like, it's like I just had a sales call with somebody before this podcast who's interested in negotiation training, and the first thing that came out of their mouth was, "I've got low self-esteem." So like, right, and but they want to become better. They want to sell more real estate. They want to be better negotiators. They want all that stuff. And I'm like, hey, listen, if you don't think you're deserving of success,
No.
then like no matter what I teach you anchoring. Who cares if you don't believe you're deserving of success? Then no success is going to come to you. So like a lot of this, like how do we deal with relationships? How do we deal with people?
Mhm.
But like most importantly, like I call it inner negotiation. Like how do we like deal with ourselves and like our own triggers and our own trauma and our own stuff boiling into our negotiations, and how do we have proper mindset, and how do we so like this is the stuff that kind of fascinates me
Yeah.
about negotiation is just kind of a symptom of having a healthy relationship with ourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, I really
Yeah.
agree with you. And I think this is why negotiation is hard. It's hard because we're really facing ourselves and we have to be ambitious, but do we feel like we deserve to be ambitious? Like,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Negotiation, computers do that all the time, when they're like just negotiating who accesses resources first and all that stuff. They do it very efficiently. But for humans, it's really, really hard because we have
Yeah.
Mhm.
emotions, relationships, all that stuff, and it kind of like brings us back to our innate fears, right? What if they walk away? What if they hate me? Like I hear that a lot. What if they're very upset, right? And I always say, well, they can be upset, like it happens. All right, so I think we should switch to the role play part. So I have written 4 role play scenarios, and I'll present each of you with 2 scenarios. And so I want you to fully immerse yourself in the role and to act out the negotiation as if it was happening live using the words and the tactics you would employ in that situation. So the goal is really to demonstrate to people this is what I would say, right? Because I feel like a lot of people sometimes don't negotiate because they just don't know what to say. Once you're done, we will discuss the approaches you took. So let's get started. Let me just share my screen. All right. So I will share it this way. Let's get the first scenario. And so the first scenario is for Tony.
Okay.
And so, no, actually, it's for Michel because I changed it up. Not knowing if Michel would manage to get his microphone. All right. So, Michel, how to negotiate with no alternative. And so, the scenario that I wrote is a business manager needs a rare part that only one supplier manufactures. He prepares to negotiate, knowing there are no alternative sources for this critical component. So, how would you approach this negotiation, Michel?
Definitely, I would take a stab at pricing, but in a sole source situation, the odds are stacked against me to start with. So I know that I'm in a begging situation where I have to limit damage. Now, if I'm facing a counterpart that I feel or demonstrate that he's being majorly opportunistic on the pricing and that negotiation, I would go with something like this. Fine, send me your invoice. But
Right.
please know this, you're giving me very good arguments to respec you on my product.
So that's a good point, right? Which is the risk that the seller has in that situation is that you just even stop the product entirely, right?
And this goes back to one of the points that was made by Tony and during the discussion previously is about transactional and relational dealings with a partner or a vendor. And if your game is the short game and mine is the long game, because we need to think about this also is maybe that component is a small part of a big sale of my product to clients. So do I really care really if I need to get that part urgently from a sole source? If that part is 55 or 60 or 70, whatever, a significant amount of my cost, then this gives me ground to take a second look and see whether I cannot create myself some alternatives, knowing that there's no alternatives out there. It's the long route, it's the difficult route, but it's the only route to take, in my opinion, to remove yourself from a dependency or a toxic relationship with a vendor.
So do you think this is an argument that can actually appeal to the counterpart? Because it feels like it would.
Well, like in any negotiation, you need to give the proper argumentatives or arguments or rationale to sell internally.
Right.
So I think it's somewhat of a disguised walk away position in my experience, uh, and you see the others' true colors. If they call you bluff and they say, well, okay, fine, good, go for it, then I
Right.
know where I stand, and this is strictly a vendor of parts, and I need to find a way to remove that risk from me, from over my head.
Yeah. And I'm assuming, right, it also depends, nobody can negotiate the electricity bill like in, I think, in
No,
Quebec, right? Because it's just we have one provider. So you can tell them, well, I'm going to walk away. They'd be like, sure, good life without electricity. Like,
good luck with that.
good luck to
Good.
you. But if it's like something, a product that is contingent on getting some sort, like you were talking, for example, like you work at Desjardins, right?
Yes,
Right. So
yes.
I was actually looking into animal insurances, and
Mm,
there's not a lot of them. It's just like a couple of them or something. But
yeah.
so let's just assume there is only one, and Desjardins wants to offer it as well, like so they're kind of like white labeling it or something. Then they could also decide, right, if the conditions are not really favorable, they could decide to stop offering it altogether, right?
Yeah, and it's on the seller side, I'm guessing is a risk and reward type of situation in that case. Again, if they want to keep their eyes on the short game, and we
Yeah.
can go into a very long contextual debate about why this product is only manufactured, is it because of raw material processes that are proprietary and so on and so forth. And this is, goes back to being prepared. You need to know a little bit as to why you're stuck with a sole source situation,
Right.
Yeah.
and then try and find waysides. The other item I think, and going back again to our exchange previously, is okay. So this is your price, and that's it. What are the perks? What else can you offer me? Can we
Yeah.
secure a longer term agreement to make sure that there's no shortage,
Right.
that we're guaranteed delivery, that quality is there, and so on and so forth, and work on the qualitative side of pricing as opposed to the quantitative side of pricing, and then everybody walks away happy,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go to the second scenario. And so this one
Okay.
is for you, Tony, and it's how to negotiate fair prices in urgency. So is it the one that I had sent you, or am I still
Well,
um,
one was we were going to do one as a seller and one as a buyer. So there was the seller
right?
one to defend pricing, and then there was a buyer one. Yeah, I think this
Right.
was under a tight deadline.
Yeah. So, faced with a sudden surge in demand, a supply chain manager must urgently procure additional raw materials. He aims to secure fair prices despite the supplier's advantage in the urgent situation. So,
Yeah,
how would you, if I was, the seller, how would you
yeah.
approach this?
Well,
What would you say?
I I think there's a few schools of thought, right? So like, I I don't know. I don't know if I have. I don't know if I have the killer instinct to be able to do this. I think I'm too nice. But like one school of thought is like you have the leverage. You know you have the leverage in this situation. You would be a fool. You'd be a fool not to negotiate with that leverage, right? So
Right.
like, hey, urgency, deadline. We've got all the leverage. You don't have any leverage. Too bad.
Right.
So that's one. I think I would maybe start off saying, hey, start off by saying there's nothing we can do. I would put up that little resistance in there. I would
Right.
defend that pricing, and I would and see how and see how my seller reacts to that.
Right.
So kind of use like these trial balloons, right? Or I guess I'm the buyer in this situation, so I would kind of
Right.
yeah. So I would kind of so buyer. So I would counter anchor. I would maybe throw in something again, maybe a low ball, and see how my seller reacts to that. And there's a lot of information I can get from how my seller reacts to that that anchor, and then I would try to say, hey, okay, well, how can we find a? I would then go into kind of like a more a collaborative way of negotiating. So like, how can we find a win-win solution to this? So I understand that you have the leverage, and I'd be transparent. Listen, I want to work with you. I like you, seller. We've had this great relationship. Uh, it's really important to me, and you're at 100, and I'm at 50. Okay,
Right.
and obviously you're not going to come below 100. I can't go above 50. I can't. It just doesn't make sense for me to go above 50. So what can we do? And I would kind of propose something along the lines of like, okay, well, what are some things that we can do to close this delta, this gap that's not price oriented, where we're not talking price, but what are some other ways? How can we take a more creative approach to this negotiation? So, like in other words, and maybe I would even facilitate this conversation with my seller. What are some ways where I won't pay where I won't pay a cent more than $50
Right.
per unit, but where you're getting the value of more than $100 per unit, where you can go back to your boss and your organization and say, hey, yes, Tony's only paying 50, but we're actually getting the value of 100 and something dollars per unit. We're actually making more money
Right.
with this new arrangement. And then where you seller, you're not going to take where you won't take or vice versa. Seller, we won't go below 100. You'll get your $100 price, but what kind of value can you give me where I can now go back to my boss and sell my organization saying, hey, yes, we're paying 100, but we're actually paying less than $50 per unit because of the value, because of some of the trades that we made in this scenario.
Yeah.
So so like, what are some things? So what are some things? What are some ways we can close the gap that are not price oriented, and really having a transparent, creative, and honest conversation? But that can only exist if we have that relationship between us. If we don't have
Right.
that relationship, then why the hell are they going to want to have that kind of conversation with me, or why am I going to want to have that kind of conversation with them? Because it takes some sort of transparency and trust to be able to reveal your cards and saying, hey, let's work together on this.
It sounds as well that it's connecting a little bit with what Michel was saying earlier, which is that you clearly, the other party has the advantage and they
Yeah.
have leverage, and you can tell them, okay, well, I don't have a choice, so I'm going to pay your price, but just so you know, I'll be looking for alternatives in the future. And so if you want, so you do have leverage if you think about the long term and keeping business with the other party. I remember just very recently, a few months ago, but I'm the president of a co-owner association, which is a horrible thing. Like, don't do it. If somebody wants you to do it, don't do it. But I was kind of like, the insurance company had been increasing prices, and the way they've been doing this is the guy would send us the proposal like 2 weeks before it expires or something, so we don't have time to like renegotiate or anything. And I told him, I was like, I'm really upset that you've been increasing the prices by like $1,000 every year. So we don't have a choice, because you're doing that right now, right before we can even have an opportunity to renegotiate. But next year we'll switch providers. And then they sent me back with $1,000 less, saying, okay, well, I went to my boss, and and we decided to lower the price. But to me, the relationship was already damaged anyway. Like I don't know that I really trust a guy anymore, because you're thinking like, dude, like, do I have to like show my teeth every time? Like, can't we just have a respectful relationship? Michel, I feel like you want to say something.
No, I been there, heard that
Yeah,
so
it's
many times.
annoying.
It's like, oh, okay, don't walk away. I just found this
Yeah.
bag of money to give you back as a discount. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, come on. We've been haggling over this for weeks on end. Now I'm threatening to walk away, and all of a sudden, discounts magically appear. What is
Yeah.
this?
And the guy was then telling me, but I'll give it to you as a discount for next year, like, kind of like as a credit for next year. And I told him, no, dude, like, you send me a check. Like, I don't want to be tied to you. Like, you want to lower your price, great, but you send
Yeah,
me a check. Like, we're not
yeah.
going to do that. Okay, so now let's go to the third scenario, and this one is for you, Michel. So it's how to renegotiate after a steep increase. An office administrator faces an annual contract renewal for cleaning and security services, now significantly more expensive due to recent economic shifts. She must negotiate to manage costs while maintaining service quality. So, how do you manage such a situation where your trusted service provider is just creeping, more costs and more costs every year?
Well, first of all, I think I would debundle the cleaning and security services. Cleaning
So, what would
is
you say, for
getting,
example? So, what would you say to the person?
I would say, how would you, so we can either have a sensitive or sensible discussion about your price increase, and please
Right,
explain what your challenges are. Maybe I can help you out in some other way to fend
right,
off such increases. Maybe I can change my specifications, my requirements, whatever might be the case, and show my good faith in working with them. If that doesn't work, then I would say, okay, well, just as open book as you can be. Is it the security side of things that's hurting your cost structure, and you need to pass this on to me? Because cleaning supplies are it's a commodity,
right.
and ultimately, I would keep in my back pocket the fact that I would put their business back on the block and have them
Yeah,
rebid on the business, which would be not a good. It would not be well received by the incumbent.
right.
But if push comes to shove, rebid on your own business and see how much cost brunt you need to pass along to me. Like, really.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's really, really good. What do you think, Tony?
Um, well, yeah, I think it's all commodity based. So like, I don't know. I mean, with like a contract like this, I don't know. I think you stick to kind of competitive negotiation approach and just like
Right.
get the best price possible. I mean, when you're dealing with commodities, it's like pay the price or like go find somebody else. So I don't know
And
how much time I would focus on this.
and I guess the approach I would have, if there's no relief in sight, or there's no transparency in the discussion, just
Yeah.
sign short term, and then
So like
try
three
to
months.
3 months, a year, 2 years, whatever time it takes to transition to an alternate solution, uh, and send a clear signal to the buyer. Then, okay, I'll commit to that increase because I seem to have no choice for now, but I won't commit for long term. Now, on the flip side, if you want to use that argument in a positive way, to say, how can I help you out in amortizing those costs over maybe a longer engagement? Can we look
Right.
at 3 years? Can we look at 5 years? Can we look at options? Can we be creative about other things that would help me on the budget, help you on the budget, and we all come out without having to go through hoops of uh, going competitive again on this. So the timepiece, and that goes back to the role play that Tony was doing just before, is, what are the other dimensions I can play with? And I think time
Right.
is often overlooked, because your leverage can be defined in different ways: alternatives, time, and
Yeah.
also what kind of certainty does the vendor have of your business.
Yeah.
And this is a recipe for talking about emotionality and like these steep increases, these like, hey, the price has gone up. is a recipe for like conflict, right? So like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've got to be very delicate. I think exactly it's like, all right, well, this is the price. We have to raise prices here.
Yeah.
We got to, but what can we do? How can we get our price increase where you won't have to pay a penny more? And again, it's like it's working with this value, it's working with these other things, and we can get creative, right? So we can get creative. Maybe I
And
can
you
give you
need,
some referrals, or I don't know. There's things we could do.
you can play on the soft side of things. And if this is a going concern, I think that there needs to be and there should be a dialogue, not a one-way conversation and a monologue on the vendor's part,
Yes,
uh, dictating something to you.
yes.
If that's the case, then clearly you're not in a good relationship over the long haul.
And why make it all business? Why can't, hey, you have a condo in Cancun? Give me a week in your condo in Cancun for my family. Why do we have to stay? That's what I say. Like, why do we
Yeah.
have to? We need to
Mhm.
start broadening our vision of the negotiation. Like, maybe what can I get for my family? What are some
Right.
what are some assets? What are some things that you have that I need? And what are some things that I have? What are some assets that I have that you might need? And like, how do we start exchanging these assets for needs and
Mm.
having a really open conversation about these different things?
And so this is really interesting because I think what you're both saying is extremely interesting. A lot of times, providers, they increase their prices because they're making the assumption that you're not going to switch because it's going to be a pain, right? It's going to be a pain to like interview other people and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But they're oftentimes missing the part where by doing that, you're also pissing people off and it becomes like personal and emotional. And
Yeah.
so suddenly they don't care if they're going to waste time because they just want to get rid of you. And so it's really something. If you have somebody who's upset and feels like they're being taken advantage of, okay, there's going to be a transition cost, right? They're going to have to switch to another provider, but they're totally willing to do it because emotionally it's what feels right.
If there's a business case to move, then all bets are off, and then the big D word into play, which is divorcing a vendor.
Yeah.
So just keep increasing your pricing, guy, and
Yeah.
I'll be more than happy to backfill with a very solid business case and an ROI that's less than 2 years or whatever the time it would take.
That's a good point.
Mhm.
All right, let's do the last scenario. And so this one is for you, Tony. And so this
Yeah.
one is from the perspective of the seller. It's
Okay.
how to maintain a profit on bulk purchases. And so a
Yeah.
sales manager is approached by a client looking to place a large order supplies and is pushing for a substantial discount. She aims to maintain the company's profit margins while satisfying the customer's needs.
Yeah. Well, this is a tough one, but like, I think first I would start off by establishing, our relationship. Listen, we have a
Right.
good relationship together, and
Mhm.
and then also saying, and I understand, and believe me, I've done my homework, and I've prepared for this. So I've actually gone back and I've negotiated prices on your behalf. So what the price we're offering right now is the negotiated price because I know that you're ordering bulk. So letting them know that this pricing right here is the negotiate. I've already looked after you. I've negotiated this pricing on your behalf. This is the pricing. We can't go below this pricing. So I think as a salesperson, I would say you need to establish that anchor, and you need to defend that anchor and let them know that the price is the price, and then sit back and watch how the buyer reacts. Either the buyer will give in, okay, they'll pay the price. If they're unskilled, they might do that. Perfect. Bingo, got the deal. The buyer will then will just say, we'll kind of drop out. We'll be like, well, I don't want to do business with you. Not a bad thing if that happens. Maybe it's not worth our time to do business with this buyer. Or most likely, the buyer might get upset or angry. If the buyer gets upset or angry, wonderful. That's one of the best things that can happen, because that demonstrates that, hey, we've got leverage, that the buyer needs our product. They want to do business with us, and they're not getting their way. So if they get angry, that's a really good sign. Um, or the buyer, if they're like Michel, they're more skilled, they might not, they might stay cool, calm, and collected. But if I defend long enough, they'll slip up. They'll leak information that will give me information to know that, hey, they're willing to pay they're willing to pay a higher price than I think they are.
Right.
So and then there are two questions I always teach salespeople. First question is there any other than price? Is there anything else we need to negotiate? You got to ask that question, and because if you don't ask that question, that there's a lot of buyers who are kind of manipulative, and if you don't ask that question, buyers can pull all these different types of tactics on you. The nibble tactic, the salami tactic. There's all these things that buyers will do. So you got to ask, other than price, is there anything else that we need to negotiate? If they say yes, then before you even talking price, you negotiate everything else before you get the price. Because how am I supposed to give you a better price when I don't know what kind of concessions I'm going to be making in other areas?
Right.
If they say no, it's all about price, I say, okay, fantastic. So now we know it's just the price that we need to negotiate. Everything else you agree on, getting their confirmation. Yes, I agree on everything else. It's just price, Tony. Okay, perfect. And then the second question is, if I were to give you a concession on price today, if I do give you, are you willing to sign a contract with me right away?
Right.
Getting that question out there, because if they say, they'll either say, well, no, I'm meeting with your competition. Okay, well, then we can negotiate price after you speak
Right.
with, after the competition. I'm not going to negotiate with price with you right now. Or they'll say, well, I'm not the decision maker. I can't give you a contract. So what am I doing negotiating price with you? You're just going to take this pricing, go to my competitors and use this pricing to get a better deal with my competitors? No. Let's get an appointment with one of your decision makers. I'm not going to negotiate price with you if you're not the decision maker. Or they will say, hey, I've got influence. I'm a part of the committee. Then you can say, hey, all right, I'll negotiate the price with you. I'll give you a concession only, and getting something in return, only if you back our proposal with your leadership team, with your committee. I need your word that you're going to back our proposal. Or they'll say something along the lines of, well, under principle, I need to meditate. I need to pray on it. I need to let it marinate. I don't make quick decisions. Great.
Right.
Well, let's fill out the proposal. Let's get everything on paper. And then I'll leave it with you. And after you've meditated on it for 2 days, you could just sign it, and then we've got a deal. So that's kind of like the process I would use with a situation like that. Those two questions are two big questions. Other than price, anything else we need to negotiate? And then, hey, if I give you the deal right now, will you close right now? Those two questions are the magic questions for sales negotiators right there. They get rid of all the love buyer bullshit when you use those two questions.
That's a really, really good point. Yeah. All right. You guys, we're reaching the end of the hour. Thank you very, very much for both of you for coming on the show. It's really appreciated. I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I think, we've really had very insightful discussions. So please, if you're in the attendance or you're watching this video, please go and connect with them on LinkedIn. You can follow them. They post regularly about negotiation. You guys, I hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you,
Jean-Nicolas. Hey, Tony.
Yes, always
pleasure meeting you.
Yes, pleasure
Thank
meeting
you, guys.
Well. All right.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.